Welcome back to the art room. Mrs. Larrabee here. This week we're going to be creating an illustration based on artwork in the book, The Strawberry Moon Says Goodnight. This is written about the Santa Maria Valley, which is where we live here, and highlights some of the things that go on in our valley, and the idea of the strawberry moon, or the full moon in June, which is when strawberries are ripe. We look through the illustrations of the book. If you'd like to hear it, you can look back and see a recording, listen to a recording of the book and see some of the illustrations. But the idea is that there's a big full moon. We're going to have a starry night sky, and we're going to draw a field with some strawberries. You'll need one sheet of paper. I'm using 12 by 18. I folded my paper in half. So I had it vertical, I folded it in half, and I already have a circle outlined here. You might want to find something to add a circle to. You're going to need some paint for this lesson. I've mixed a gray with just a white and a tiny bit of black in there. I need some white paint. We'll need some green paint. I also mixed a tiny bit of black in because it's supposed to be nighttime to make it darker, and a little bit of red. Okay, here's where things get crazy, okay? You're going to need a few paint brushes. You're also going to want an old toothbrush and a Q-tip and a paper towel. We're going to be doing several different kinds of painting using some different techniques to create texture in the starry night sky. All right, if you're in the classroom with me, we're probably going to be doing this in steps, so you may not have all the supplies at the very beginning, but maybe in lesson 2 you'll get a few more. All right, the first thing we're going to do, we're going to paint in our circle with our gray paint. You might have white. If you have a grayer background paper, you might have more of just a white paint. Since I'm using a blue, I'm going to go with a gray paint to start painting in my moon. Notice that I'm holding my brush just like I would a pencil, and I'm using the edge of my brush to very carefully paint around the edge. We want to try to keep this circle looking like a circle, so we're going to paint steady and slow. We're going to use smooth brush strokes to make it look smooth. Remember, I said we were going to come back and add some texture in just a minute. Right now, this first layer, we want to have smooth. I tend to go around and outline it first as I pull the paint around, and then I'll go back in and I'm going to fill in these sections in the middle with my gray paint. When you feel like you've covered up most of the blue, you'll still see a little bit of it. You will have part 1 complete. All right, when we look at the moon, and the illustrations in the book even, it shows that the moon has these dark spots, these little craters in there. Do you see how the moon has dark and light areas? We're working with the dark areas first. Take a little bit more of your gray paint, and I want you to just add some circles inside your circle. We're going to use these to signify where those craters would go. You could put 2 or 3 on there. And then I want you to grab just a tiny bit of your pure white paint. And can you go back over those craters, adding a little bit of that white on top? This is our step 1 of adding, or I'm sorry, this is step 2 of adding texture. We added a smooth part in the background. Now we're adding a little bit of a different color on the front. All right, everybody make a letter C with their hand. Do you see how it curves? It looks like half a circle. We're going to paint a letter C on our paper, but instead of using flat brush strokes and smooth brush strokes, we're going to use staccato, or the end of our brush, and use those kind of brush strokes. So I'm over here getting a little white paint on the very tip of my brush. I'm going to go back over, and I'm going to just put white paint on a letter C. I'm just using the very tip of my brush, and I'm making the letter C around the edge of my circle, or about halfway around. All right, that's kind of thin. I'm going to go in and I'm going to make the center a little more thick. So I'm adding more paint, and I'm going out just beside that very first line, coming back around with one more. All right, let's go back one more time. We're going to add a little bit more paint to the inside. Do you see how it's thin up here and it gets thicker as it goes around, and it gets thin again? We're just adding some highlight and some texture to the side of our moon. Did I go all the way around the circle? No, I just went on one side. I just made a letter C on top of my circle. All right, when you feel like you've added enough white paint to really make it look like the letter C, you know what? It looks like the crescent shape. Like if it wasn't a full moon and you could only see part of the moon, we kind of highlighted a crescent shape on top. Okay, so layer 1, we made it smooth. Layer 2, we added some of these crater zones. Layer 3, we've added some paint on top that has a little more texture. Here's layer 4. You're going to take your piece of paper towel, and I want you to crumple it up like you're going to throw it away, but don't throw it away. All right, we've created some folds right here. We're going to take this and we're going to carefully go over the top of all of our moon. We're just creating another layer of texture. It's blending in some of these paint colors as well. You don't want to go outside of the moon. You want to try to keep it inside the circle. It's really starting to look like the moon now, isn't it? Like how we see it through our telescope, how it was illustrated on the cover of the book. It has all these texture spots. Okay, I probably went, what do you think, maybe 12 times? Yeah, I would start with 5 and work your way up. All right, you don't need to do it very much. All right, so we've added our 4th layer of texture. We're going to carefully put this aside so we don't get too much more paint on us. We're done with the moon at this point, so we don't need to paint the moon anymore, but I do think we might need some stars. All right, so we're going to open our papers. We've had them folded in half up till now. We're going to open our papers. It's time to paint with a toothbrush. Watch carefully with how we're going to do this. I'm going to dip the bristles of my toothbrush into the paint. If you're in the classroom with me, you might be sharing a paintbrush with or a toothbrush with your neighbor. So you're going to be very patient, okay? Do you see how I've added some paint to the bristles of my brush? Sometimes it gets to be too much paint and you might need to go over to the side and just tap a little bit of the paint off, okay? This is about what it should look like. There's paint on the bristles, but it's not so heavy and globby inside. All right, we're gonna point our paintbrush down to our paper. So the bristles of the paintbrush are pointed at my moon. It's almost like I'm gonna brush my moon's teeth if it had teeth, right? While I'm holding the paintbrush, I'm going to run my finger over the bristles and it's going to splatter the paint. You ready to see what it looks like? That's pretty cool. I'm going to go back and get some more paint. Remember, get the paint on your toothbrush and then dab it off on the side just a little so we don't have too much. We're going to cover our whole paper with these stars. Think about it for just a moment. What would happen if I picked my toothbrush up and I ran my fingers on it? Yeah, I bet you guys just said the paint's going to splatter wherever the toothbrush is painted or pointed. So if it's not pointed down at the table, it's going to hit our neighbor. It's going to hit their paper. It's going to hit the table. We want to make sure that it's pointed right to our paper, and we're very careful with it. This is a very responsible thing to get to do, to get to paint with the toothbrush. Make sure you go all the way down to the bottom of your paper. If you want to get a little closer to your paper, you might see some bigger marks of the star. All right, so let's see. We had layer 1 where we painted smooth. We had layer 2 where we added the craters. We had layer 3 when we stippled the paint on. We had layer 4 when we used the paper towel to add some texture and blend our colors. Layer 5, we painted with a toothbrush, making some stars. All right, if we're in the classroom, this is where we're going to pause for today, but the rest of us can keep going. We're going to go down to the bottom of our paper now. This is where we're going to make our field for our strawberries. All right, when you think about the hills that you see around town, are they straight across or are they like a wavy line? I bet you're going to say wavy line. All right, so we're going to take our paintbrush and we're going to paint a wavy line on the bottom of our paper. If yours starts to get scratchy like mine did, it means you need some more paint. Maybe a tiny bit of water to keep your brush running smooth. All right, go ahead and paint in everything below this line. So I'm going to paint all the way down to the bottom of my paper. We do want to be careful. We don't want to purposefully get paint on the table, but there's going to be a little paint on the tables for this part, and that's okay. We can wipe the tables off. Just be very careful with it. Paint neatly. All right, so we painted all of our grass in for our field of strawberries. All right, that looks pretty good. Lastly, we're going to use our Q-tip and our red paint. This is kind of fun. When you see the fields around town, if you happen to be here in town and able to drive by, you will notice that the strawberries are planted in nice, neat rows. In the book, it was telling us that the strawberry moon was actually nicknamed by the Native Americans. They were out collecting wild strawberries. Wild strawberries wouldn't be growing in a nice, neat row. They would be growing wild in whatever pattern the plant happened to be in. So you have a choice now. You can use your paint to make little rows of strawberries, like how we might see them now growing out on one of the ranches. Or you can use your Q-tip to plant wild strawberries, and they can be just anywhere on your paper. Either way works. I'm simply just dipping the edge of my Q-tip into my red paint and adding some strawberries to my picture. And there we have it. Strawberry fill under the strawberry moon, just like we read about in our book. Hope you guys enjoyed this art lesson, and I'll see you back here next time in the art room.